when he was starting out, he was published a lot in Weird Tales.
Yeah, when he
That's when he
first
was
got,
starting.
but
His first gig was finishing a short story with a Lee Brackett.
Oh,
Yeah, the Sorceress, because I have it in her collection.
wow.
Something, the Sorceress is something, one of her Venusian stories.
Yeah.
And I forget if it was like he finished up, she wasn't able to finish it on time, or he just helped out. It was like 17, it was a very early, you could tell, it's very much a Brackett story, it's
Yes.
not much a Bradbury.
yeah, I think
So when did they start doing like, so at this point, or is it just reprints or mainly reprints and very few, because.
And basically, the pulp magazine market kind of collapsed in the 50s, and a lot of the writers who had readerships in the pulps, and of course, we're talking about westerns, war, horror, science fiction, romance,
Kind of stories.
yeah, noir, detective, hardboiled detective,
Crime,
yeah, crime stuff. Black Mask magazine being, something like that. They naturally transitioned into paperback originals.
Okay.
And basically, because a lot of those old pulp magazines, they have a 60,000 word story in them. Along with just a couple of short stories and whatever, but like The Shadow always had a full novel in every issue.
Right, Phantom Detective.
Yeah, and same with Doc Savage. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
a lot of those had. There were some poor bastards chained to typewriters who were basically.
That was all the writers in the 30s and 40s.
Yeah, well, there are a few who weren't, but
All of our science fiction fantasy.
yeah, they're all basically they signed
Right.
contracts,
Yeah.
and they had to produce. And there are a few of them that people that there's a couple of them I'm blanking on the names, but they were outside the science fiction and fantasy genre that we're familiar with. But there were a couple of them that were just they did kind of like what I would call Tobacco Road type, novels and things like that. Like gritty stories.
Southern realism.
Yeah, or just two-fisted men stories.
Oh, yeah, well, those were magazines too. They
Yeah.
were magazines just like that.
Yeah.
Which most of us don't collect or haven't,
Well, then you have someone like in England, like John Creasy, who, to my knowledge, we're never going to know how many books he wrote.
Oh, I think he like 40 aliases or no?
Yeah, he
I was a big fan of his.
He had at least
names.
300, 400 books to his name.
And that's the thing,
And he wasn't using ghostwriters.
this definitely was a revolution in literature because you could have a direct contact with your readership because you could see how it worked, and it wasn't a lot of expensive hype about it. Nobody gave a full page in the New York Times to see that.
No, they
this
pretty
book-
much just showed up at your drugstore or your grocery
Yes,
store.
and
Where
they just done with it.
Did the New York Times even track
No,
like these?
zero.
Like, yeah,
Not
so
at
it wasn't
first,
even like, so
Yeah,
you
maybe
could
now.
sell
No,
as many of
it's
these
just
as
Now they
you
can
could, so you could put on the
I
shelf,
don't think they
and
did
yet
that.
you were not a best-selling, you were not a New York Times best-selling author.
Well, and eventually they learned that you could put a book out in cloth, and then within a year or so, put it out in paper, and you sell even more.
Yes. And
It took me forever. Well, not till I was much more of an adult, but because, I got a lot of paperbacks when I was a kid. I grew up reading paperbacks. And so when I heard the song and the Beatles paperback writer, I thought that was like, oh yeah, that's a pretty cool thing to be. It took me like, it wasn't until much later when I was an adult that I realized, oh wait, this is a sarcastic song. This is an ironic song.
Wait,
Like,
it is?
they're not, I know, right?
Yeah.
They're not like,
Yeah,
this is not a praiseworthy profession, right?
Well, not only that, but Lennon had wanted to be a writer.
Sure.
He wanted to be, and he did have some books published after he became
Famous.
Beatle. But yeah, he was very much in the Thurber school.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really? Wow.
Yeah,
Who would have thought that?
yeah, but but yeah, Spaniard, the words, and in his own right, and a few others. A lot of wordplay. But, but yeah, he wanted to be a writer. And I know for a fact, because a good friend of mine is friends with them, that they all were voracious readers. Because there's nothing else to do.
There's nothing to do in Liverpool.
Well, yeah,
And you're talking about a hard-working town, right? That, I mean, then there wasn't, I mean, there were movies and everything, but this was escapism, right? For
Yeah.
them. Like, this was, you can put it in your pocket, carry it wherever you
Reno's a
went.
voracious science fiction
They
fan.
also from Liverpool, born right around the end of World War II.
Yeah.
Rationing was still on in the UK when my mother lived there in
Yeah.
56 to 59. So getting books, you couldn't like still get chocolate bars reliably. So yeah, you would have a lot of time to read. And two of them were Catholic, so knocking boots with your girlfriend would have been like sternly repressed. So,
And these are written, I mean, these are full of exciting stories,
Yeah.
adventure
Yeah.
stories, pulpy stories, like lurid stories, like,
Yeah.
it's so perfect for teenagers.
Yeah,
And,
so,
and the other thing great with paperbacks, not as much in the science fiction field, but they had much better cover art than most of the hardbacks. Now, I think in the science fiction fantasy thing, the hardbacks still had really good stuff, but most mainstream publications, the cover art was nothing.
you know, it was Dust
terrible.
Jacket.
It was just terrible.
I'm trying to remember
Why,
what cover
why,
it from that
why do you
period.
think that is? Because they were trying to sell them?
No, I mean, they were trying to sell the paperbacks.
Yeah.
But
So they needed something to really stand out on the rack.
And
right?
it's also, to be fair, picking up the market, you know.
They also just frankly reused-
Pulp magazines are lurid to say
And they
the least.
quickly reused the pulp covers of
Yes.
the novels.
they would do that too,
So
yes.
they were already there, and you could pay the artist a
Right.
bit more and get a really good
So,
cover.
it's about this, yeah, so it's about this time also the same deal with comics at the time.
Yep.
Which were originally aimed at all markets, not just teenage boys.
Yes.
And, but yeah, a lot of these guys from the pulp, a lot of the better covers from the time were guys who had been, pulp artists, pulp magazine artists.
Yeah.
And they just transitioned into,
Paperback.
paperback.
Yeah.
And some of them are, and some became like Bama
Mhm.
and McGinley.
Oh, yeah.
They truly were probably iconic,
Yes.
especially in the 60s.
Well, like Obama did all of the Doc Savage
Yeah.
paperback things. And then there was I think it was called the Herod Experiment. And
The what?
The Herod Experiment. This goes way back.
Oh, that's the movie, the literature wrote, Ted Cassidy wrote that.
No, it was a book. It was a book first.
Maybe he did a screenplay then.
He made, but it's the, so. No, the Herod Experiment, though. The paperback that came out, I said, why does this man and woman look so much? It was drawn by Baum. And I didn't know that for years and years and years. And it was like, oh, this is how he made his real money.
Yeah, well, he made his real money doing westerns.
Yes, he was perfect with horses.
Yeah.
He was just incredible. I'm not a big Western fan, but his art, wow.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, these people are really great artists, and that's what helped sell paperback books. And
Well, they
now-
travel with you so much more easily than a magazine does. They literally fit in a pocket.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, they were called pocketbooks.
Yeah.
And there was a
Pocket-
company that calls itself
Yeah, they're
pocketbook.
pocket-
Or they fit in your purse, hit
Yes.
the pocketbook.
Oh, that pocket.
But if you have actual pockets,
Yeah.
like men always.
Yeah.
Well,
They
they
would fit in the back pocket, no problem.
Yeah.
Or a coat pocket, that's where mine lived, is my coat pocket.
And so
They lived in my mother's purse.
Because magazines are just a horrible format.
they are definitely, because I have a lot of them, and they're not surviving very well. And I'm trying to
And
keep
just they're
them.
not very size, they're not very shape, you have to make them a roll, they don't fit anything like they're really, and then
Yes.
pocketbooks are way more, that's why I like my e-readers, let's be honest.
but these were great. Now, I wanted to bring up something. When was the last time any of you were in a Barnes and Noble? Or,
It's been a
Oh, it's
while.
been a while.
okay, I walked into a Barnes and Noble maybe half a year ago, and finding a hardback science fiction book, impossible. Because they have these things that are like oversized paperback books,
Yeah.
but there are no hardbacks.
They used to have to use, well, last time I went was maybe a year or so ago. If you went to the science fiction fantasy section at the very beginning, there would be the new stuff which would be in hardback, and like you said,
A couple.
then there'd be like, well, there were like a shelf or two at least.
Yeah.
Because like, I only buy in hardback, they just take the space. My favorite authors, I could add one on pre-order that's coming in the first week of
Right.
September, because it's an author I'll
But
even reread.
now, they're not really selling them now. They're not selling the paperbacks. They have this in-between things, which I
Yeah,
think
they
they can
don't.
cause more.
They don't really
Well,
sell mass market.
paperbacks are not this size.
No, but
They're all
this-
trade paperbacks.
this
They used
is-
to call trade
this
papers.
is-
Yeah,
That's the mass market
Yeah.
paper, but they don't basically make that.
Yeah, mass market, because
Pretty
it's
much
actually,
ebooks is the plans and done. I mean, if I
Yeah.
have my choice and spend the same money, I'm buying an ebook which will travel with me everywhere,
Yeah.
rather than a paperback.
well, trade, what they call paperback now, when I got into published called trade paper.
Yeah, they're still the bigger ones. Those are what you see everything.
And those are the ones that they actually can stand being read repeatedly and
Right,
hold up better.
but there were no hardbacks, except for the very few that were brand new.
Or the ones from
They don't-
authors that they know they can sell.
Right,
Yeah.
because they don't, yeah, because they're too,
Well,
you know,
part of
they're
that
too
tremendous
expensive.
has been like, I won't say decimated.
Yes, it has been
Eradicated.
Decimated
Yeah,
is.
There is no,
Polite.
there is no mid-list.
Yeah,
I can tell you,
so
there
unless
is
you're
no
a big
mid-list.
name, you don't get a hardback
Yeah.
release.
I know.
Um.
So this is, dead, unfortunately.
Well, I don't mind that, because to me, an e-reader is much better than a paperback copy.
Yes, I know.
I have paperbacks that are,
Except that.
I've owned for 4 years.
There's a certain romance to them, I mean,
Yes.
especially when you look at the covers and you smell them. I don't know
I
about
don't
you
know,
guys,
this
but smelling.
smelling fetish that many people have about it.
Oh, man, if I walk into an old bookstore.
Oh, yeah.
Let me say,
that
a
just
fish crawling on one
smells
corner.
so
You're just too modern, Don.
Although, as someone who puts out ebooks, I'll tell you one of the biggest problems with it is that, there's no guarantee when you download it that it will format properly.
Right, yes, it is difficult. I
Well,
have,
PDFs are supposed to solve that, but
supposed to.
Yeah.
it doesn't fit on your
And I don't like,
phone.
yeah,
Depends
I
on-
also don't like, releasing my books in PDF format because I need to print them out.
Yes.
Or, yeah.
And publish
or
them
just- Or
if they
just
so
send the PDF
desire.
to someone else, yeah. So, yeah, they're very, it is tricky. It is really tricky.
Yeah, it's just, I don't particularly want to, I've already had, piracy issues
Oh, yeah.
anyway,
Well,
so.
That's the thing is, even if it's not a PDF, if there's anything they can capture, they can turn it to what they
The real sadness about paperbacks going away is when I was a kid, we were poor, so we would go to Goodwill, frequently. And I would always hit the table and hit the books, because I could get, I think children's paperbacks were a nickel, and the bigger, like hardbacks were 19 cents. So I got my Nancy Drews, my Bobbsey Twins, my Trixie Weldons, my every horse story ever written by English, whatever else they had that looked interesting.
That was back
They
in the
don't
last
have,
century.
they don't have
wasn't
those
it?
in the
They
stores
still
anymore.
have some books.
But nowadays, that's gone. I mean, you won't see all those books that you will serendipitously discover
All
at a
that's in
cheap
there is
price point.
inspirational religious books.
Right, yeah, the best plan is to go to a used bookstore like Book Nook or someplace like that, and still
Yeah.
has like a lot of cheap,
Yeah.
Well, I
paperbacks.
found about used bookstores too, is that they pretty know the market and what's out there.
Sure.
And they know the value.
Oh, right, so yeah, you can't get them for 5 cents anymore. If
Yeah.
anything,
I think
it's
the
like
last time I
vintage,
was
right?
You know you're really desperate when you go on eBay
I
and you
went
read
to
it,
ask
$15 for a 70s paperback, because you have to reread it and you don't have a copy anymore.
I asked him about a particular book that I knew was coming out because I'm friends with the author.
Yeah.
I knew it was out. She said it was already out. They had no record of it anywhere.
Huh.
So I went somewhere else and got it. But the point is,
They wrote them.
A book,
Not even on the computer. I mean, okay, they don't have their copies in yet. Can you look it up? No.
That's weird, because you should be able to. You
So,
said Barnes and Noble?
so one of the
Right,
things
that's part of the whole-
Well, it also depends on who you
you
get.
read some books that your parents had in their house, right?
Probably a few, mostly I read my own books.
I went into the garage where my mother kept her old books that she had as a girl, and I found all the Nancy Drew books.
Oh, sweet.
And I
The
read-
dark blue combat?
Up to
Or the
that-
yellow back?
up to that point.
The ones from the 30s. when
The
she
really
was a
old
kid.
yellow back.
Yes, and I read them all, you know, and I went,
I love Nancy.
I like, this is a great series, and then I read the Hardy Boys,
I never did know.
and I thought the Hardy Boys, these people have it too easy to have a father. It's not a problem. Nancy had to fight her father all the time. You can't go out and do that. Really, Dad? I got a car.
Car at 18.
Yeah.
What 18-year-old do you know owns a car in
But
1930?
she was a cub reporter.
Well, he was a,
He was a wealthy
Lawyer.
attorney, yeah.
Yeah, he was
I mean,
very
a
rich.
housekeeper, I think, and servants.
yeah.
That's what's great to read the really old ones.
I have a question
How
for you.
cheap it used to be and how
So-
servants cost a little.
So, question for you regarding the sort of, because we talked a little bit about, or I mentioned a little bit about, you know, when these are starting to come out, that they're able to have a little bit more, you know, horror and crime and science fiction and weird elements to them.
All that weird
And
stuff.
that's in the 50s, right? Now, you kind of mentioned that, you know, comics were doing that too in all ages, but then, you know, the door slammed on comics because of the comics code and everything that was, we don't need to rehash all that, but.
It was an attack on EC.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Tack on EC, but it
But
affected the entire industry and it still hasn't recovered fully because people still feel like comics are for kids in a lot of ways.
Well.
So, but my question is,
Have you seen the numbers for Deadpool versus
I know.
Wolverine?
Well, the movie numbers are so great, the comic numbers, but
Well,
anyway.
that has a lot to do with the fact that
A lot of factors.
they
yeah.
made, the biggest mistake comics made was allowing itself to be turned into a destination purchase as a point, you know.
Sure.
Imagine how much a candy bar would cost if you had to go to the candy bar store.
Right. My question is, though, because that comics had the door shut on them for having this material, did that really help boost the paperback novels and the paperback sales? Because that's where you had to go for.
Well, it's also a transition of the, basically, the post-war, you know, all the GIs who came back. Most of whom, you got to bear in mind, were really young when they went. If they came back, they were, you know.
They were older than the guys in
Hardy.
Man. The average World War II soldier was like 23, 24 versus Man was like 18, 19.
Yeah.
So they spent 3.5 years, 4
Yeah.
years. So they
Yeah.
wouldn't have been terribly young when they came back.
Yeah, it depended. My grandfather was in his 30s when he was drafted.
Wow.
So, yeah, that was, you know, but he ended up in the OSS.
Oh yes, my grandfather was, geez. Well, Canada entered
Yeah,
39, so he
people
would have been
forget
39
how
when he got
severe
drafted.
that was for us.
It's
And,
not bad,
but they came back and they were looking for, you know, when they left, pulp magazines were the thing, and when they came back, those didn't exist anymore, and that generation helped fuel the growth of the
And
paperback
books covered
market.
the whole range. I mean, you
Yeah,
had the
yeah.
whole ranges of westerns, film noir,
Yeah,
women's
World
stories,
War I, you know, fire
crime
race
and
stories,
Yeah.
true romance and all of it.
spicy
Well, a lot of the-
war
Yeah,
ones.
yeah, the
fire
whole
race
gamut.
stories.
A lot of the paperbacks were.
Spicy War, seriously?
Yeah, there was a whole company called Spicy. They did
Yeah.
every genre possible
Yeah.
with spicy in front of it.
For people who like a little more action with their story.
Or at least show Smankle there, yeah.
Well, that's
And,
all appeal.
yeah, there's Spicy Cowboy, Spicy Range Tales, Spicy, they had, you know,
You can see
basically.
those, but.
And then there was a whole subcategory of horror that, or weird suspense, whatever you want to call it, which are the shutter pulps, which don't exist anymore except for Scooby-Doo. Where it's like, it wasn't really, oh, it's a monster or a ghost. No, it's some guy with a mask,
Yeah,
which exists now.
because of Scooby-Doo.
Well, that's only, Scooby-Doo is what
Like a
survived
dead still member
of
of
that
that
genre.
Like a dead isolated language.
Yeah, well, you say, there's a bunch of old 1930s two-reelers and three-reelers.
That's cool, I did not know that was an actual genre.
Yeah, it's called the shutter pulp. And a lot of those are spicy. But they also tied into, had a lot in common with the Yellow Peril
Oh, yeah.
comics.
Yeah.
And other things that we don't talk about.
Well, that was all part of the Yellow Peril was actually a sub-part of the exotic,
Exotic, exotic, yeah, there were spicy exotic Oriental stories too.
The Sax Romer Fu Manchu.
Yeah, for people that never left, you know,
London Limehouse story.
yeah, that's the thing, it's like, we'll never see another big money Tarzan movie in our lifetimes, because that don't work anymore. That don't work. And
Sure, you just have to go to Pellucidar.
yeah, well, then you just call in John Carter of Mars, but, which is what he ended up doing. But there's a lot of genres, you know, like the Lost World type genres.
you know too much now.
Yeah,
Yeah, you have to.
yeah,
take
the
it all
world is
in.
different.
Yeah. Or Tarzan finding a new civilization every other week. And
Well, it's like Herman Melville. He made his name.
Southeast.
He made his name writing what were called travelogues, and basically things that he had done, like Taipei, I think was his first big work, where he basically talked about, you know, how his adventures amongst the cannibals in the South Sea Islands, and he did a couple more like that, and then he wrote Moby Dick, which didn't go over well because people wanted some more of the exotic travelogue stuff. No, Moby Dick was towards.
No, Billy Budd, was that before or after Moby Dick?
That was before. That was in the short story
Wasn't
area.
there an Oranu or Oromo or
Momo.
something?
Yeah, he did a few things, but Moby Dick, instead of like giving them this travelogue of all the exotic, he just how much it fucking sucked to be on a whaler, and that's the reason why anyone who jumped ship, they were jumping off a whaler. Because it was hell. It was basically an industrial hell.
And a paperback of Moby Dick would be about that thick.
Oh, yeah, it's a hunker.
Yeah, it condensed. But
I mean, it's like 50 pages about how they butcher the whales.
125 chapters.
Yeah.
How they butchered whales.
Okay.
I know. I read it 3 times.
Wow.
I read it 3 times, and I did it
You
as
gotta try it. One
and I
time
did
retirement.
one of my collections. I'm out in the hallway with the Spook Show. I wrote a novella called Absalom's Wake, which is basically what if instead of writing Moby Dick, Herman Melville created the Cthulhu mythos.
It would
Yeah.
go on forever.
No, much shorter, and homosexuality is much more explicit.
Cthulhu gets there, it's over.
Yeah,
Well, in this
exactly.
case, it's nothing's called Cthulhu, nothing, yeah,
One's
but
the greater dark.
they are the ocean born.
So,
Yeah.
for the audience, do you have any fond memories of a particular paperback book from your youth? Yes, sir, that guy right there.
Well, sort of paperbacks in general, what I miss about ebooks is every paperback was an artifact. It had its own individual history. I got to collect, when I was a teenager, I'd love to collect Albert Brent science fiction books. You know, I picked one of them out there, a bus transfer would fall out.
Airplane tickets.
City of December, 4th of December, 1957. And they,
Yeah.
Any of the people in this room who've been to my house know how many books I have?
I don't know exactly.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
Thousands.
I found it, dear
He
John.
gives my books in a Jurori complex.
Yes, there's a sense of,
Wow.
if it's a book, it's a physical book of history. Like I was big into reading Edgar Rice Burroughs when they had that revival in the early 70s, and I got all the Ace version of the
Yeah.
Frazetta covers.
I think Frazetta did a lot of those covers.
Sure, but you know, the fact is, this is the same book that I'm reading now in my 60s that I read when I was 13.
Yep.
So it's sort of a
It's
magical
a
thing.
scholarship.
Yeah, that's the thing that I kind of miss about ebooks, because an ebook is like a virtual thing. It doesn't.
And you can change the font and the,
Oh,
and
it's
the
really
text.
cool when they upgrade it, you're like, you had a cover you knew it by, and then suddenly you like download it, and you're like, wait a minute, this is my copy, I bought it from you evil overlords. Why is the cover different?
Yeah.
Well,
Because they ask you to do that.
It's the same thing as like, there's one cover, I think it was a Frank Herbert book. It wasn't one of the Dune books.
Yeah.
But I bought it like 3 times because they kept changing the cover.
And the title.
And the title.
Under Siege, that's the one, and there's 3 different titles. And I have all 3 of them.
Oh, I don't have that one, but I buy it and I start reading it. Oh.
Not all ones are downloaded by
But
reader, and they change them.
to be fair, that happens with paperbacks as well, because
That's
I
what
have,
I'm talking
I
about.
have 3 different, editions of a Robert Sheckley anthology, the People Trap. And the reason why I have 3 of them is because they all have different covers. And when I was looking at the store, I was like, I don't have this one.
But you didn't remember the name.
Yeah,
And-
the insides are exactly the same, but the
Oh,
outside.
they may have one new story in it.
Oh, like some of the Agatha Christie fans, because you're like, wait a minute, do I have this one? It's like, oh, yeah, you do. I read the back and I remember the plot. So, oh, yeah, I have that, but it's not called that. Mine's called what Mrs. McGillicuddy's on. This is the 450.
Yeah, there's the English editions and the American.
Yeah, they always change the title, because like Americans are too
Yeah.
stupid to read an English title.
Wait, you have yours all logged?
I have my books online.
Wow.
Not online, the titles and say, oh, you own this already.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not.
Yeah,
Yeah.
bookshelving software.
I'm not that organized.
I used to remember what ones I have. I've only bought the second one, the duplicate, a couple of times.
I have no idea why they changed the Agatha Christie title to "And Then There Were None."
Yeah, that would at least make some sense.
Yes, there's a reason for that.
The others that make
And
no.
there's, the times change.
I remember
1930.
the Man from U.N.C.L.E. books. I used to have all the Man from
Yes.
U.N.C.L.E.
Now those,
That Mike Avalone wrote
Yeah,
this.
Oh,
yeah,
yeah, I remember that name.
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm friends with his son,
oh.
and he's writing the Nick Carter series.
Oh, yeah, I remember Nick Carter. Never bought them, but I saw them in the books up many,
So,
many times.
the reason she's buying these is because of on the covers, it's your curiosity. But that's not on the first one. No, that was Napoleon Solo on the first one. But then
But
on,
Napoleon was on some of the other covers.
yeah,
Sorry.
but he was getting further into that route. Because of all of you women out there who wanted David Callum.
Look, if I had to look at one bimbo in a fur bikini, you can suck it up while we enjoy it.
Yeah, man,
No, I bought them because I liked the Man from U.N.C.L.E.
Yes.
But of course.
And
Of course, they're curiosity.
You know.
There was something really magical about, I mean, even before you got to read the text, you know, if you're getting a Robert E. Howard book or Edgar Rice Burroughs or something like that, the cover art takes you to that escapist fantasy even before you read like page 1. And like you're already
Yeah.
there because of the artwork.
it sets the scene.
It does a lot of heavy lifting for it, for the
Yeah.
author.
And
I-
sometimes
it's not
the
fair.
only good thing about the book was the cover.
It could be.
I used to pick out books by the illustrator, like I love Brian Jakes, and I was writing a book that had a Brian Jakes cover, and I discovered favorite authors that way.
Yeah, Roy Crinkle was a great one.
Yeah.
Oh,
Crinkle,
yeah.
I actually stand to it
Roy
my
Crinkle
whole
Jr.
word
per
book,
se.
because I love the Crinkle covers, they were great
Yes.
covers.
Yeah.
It blew my mind because recently, artist Joe Jusko did a complete run of covers for all the Tarzan books. And what was amazing to me about it, besides his just gorgeous artwork,
I
is
would
that
compare him to Bauman.
that had never been done before. They had never issued out all of the Tarzan books with one consistent cover artist
Yeah.
before, and that really surprised me because I thought that was
Yeah, they
done
had, sometimes it'd be Frizette, sometimes it'd be Crinkle, sometimes it'd be,
Yeah.
some guy could barely draw.
He basically had a farm in Australia or New Zealand, one of those places, and there's just like naked women all over the place. So that's in the movie. That's in the movie. So who knows?
Was that movie Sirens?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's what it was.
I'll look up who
Right
they
there,
are.
Yeah, one of the most prolific writers in the world was from Australia, which was, He had about 15 different pseudonyms.
Yeah.
What was his name again?
We're
Oh,
working on that.
We're getting there.
he did a lot of I would call it knockoff Mike Hammers.
Oh, I don't read those, so I probably wouldn't know.
I'm blanking on his name, but he and Richard O'Brien became close friends.
Really?
Rocky Horror?
Yeah,
Really?
yeah.
Richard O'Brien?
And O'Brien was gonna do a like a bio about it, and then he died. And, damn it, one of his, he did a knockoff Honey West, her name was Mavis. that I remember.
That's not a name you see ever.
No, and she was like, yeah, give me a second.
The typing moment is big.
Maybe-
I worked with a Mavis, because she was older than me, so.
Was it, the person you're trying to think of, was that Norman Lindsay?
Brown.
Okay.
One of his
No, not yet,
pseudonyms was
but when
Brown.
he was talking about
I don't
the
remember.
Australian writer.
Yeah.
Or, no, artist.
I mean, I really don't know.
Gotcha.
I can't remember the name.
Sirens is about Norman.
Yeah.
Australia's not a country I go over and scantily plus.
Alan Jeffrey Yates.
Hmm?
Alan Jeffrey Yates.
Yes, that's it, Yates.
Oh.
He was English but moved to Australia.
Oh, Carter
And-
Brown, I've heard of
And
him.
Carter Brown, yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I didn't read them, but I didn't remember seeing them in the book notes.
Yeah, he was like one of the most prolific authors of the 20th century. and he's another one where we may never know how many books he published.
Well, and then there's certain authors whose names are all over the place, but really there are lots of different people ghosting for him. And I mean, the original.
Or they're even dead, like B.C. Andrews.
Like, yes.
Who is dead, but still produces somehow.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but there was, I can't remember, there were several.
Elroy Hubbard as well.
Well, Elroy Hubbard, there's.
Oh, and then
there's
you talk
a
about the
different-
Nancy Drews, they were written, Stratemeyer stuff was written by bunches of people.
Right, I'm not counting them, but there was
Okay.
one, there were a couple people where, when they died, when the person died, somebody else took it on but kept the same name, so it was part of the thing. But it wasn't stuff that was supposed to be like Nancy Drew, where it's a TV show effect in books.
There was an author named Heron Carving, isn't that a great name? He was like a character, British actor, he wrote like 5 books. Was an elderly, English, but he was a arts mistress, so he retired. And she has 5 or 6 very amazing mysteries where she gets involved with like 60s modern life. And she's very Victorian in her mindset, and it's very, very funny. He died relatively young, and they hired like 3 different people who could be in the series. And I've never enjoyed any of it. I tried to continue, but they just thought it was good. But I love when it's eaten sometimes. It's one of the first books I bought when I got my Kindle out.
Yeah, the house names were definitely something that carried over.
Yeah, I
from
think
books.
the Zorro books were, it was a house name and it was different writers for a lot of the Zorro books.
Well, there was like, the first one was a short story about something separate, the ones where the gods come back to. But anyway, there was a short story a long time ago. Capistrano, yeah.
Swallows.
Yeah, I can. Anyway, but and that was the original Zorro. And then there was some people came in, and then it just became a house.
I never read his
house
work,
thing.
that's not-
Yeah. Well, it's like Raphael Sabatini.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Did anybody else write any reason? Because the stuff, it's all, I remember seeing it was new. Everything I read because it was old stuff that was
Well, Raphael Sabatini was, doing him and Dumas, pretty much created the adventure,
Swashbuckling.
the adventure series.
Yeah. Pirates, generally
Yeah.
swashbuckling. Scaramouche is still a good read.
Yes.
It's aged, and it's very sexist, but it's still a decent jolly read.
Well, of course. And it's just like, it's like, I'm going, at one point, I was approached by someone who managed to buy the rights to a lot of old stuff, like Black Mask and things like that. And they were looking to find someone who could update these stories by, you mean rewrite? They were kind of, but sort of like, what they meant was to shave the racism and sexism off.
You know, that's gonna be, in some cases it would be okay, but in some cases it's such an
And they wouldn't have anything left.
Nothing left.
Yeah,
This was the sexism, I'm sorry, guys, early film, it's like, oh, women, oh, scary aliens, oh, women, you know, it's like, Jesus.
Oh, yeah, I said, some of these, I mean, basically, I said, you're just gonna, he had like a lot of these, like, Dr. Yunsen, I said, well, you're just gonna have to eat that loss, because there's no way you can redo that. Yeah, there's no way you can take any of these yellow peril holds and turn them into anything, except
I think that's one of the reasons why, a lot of the writers who have taken over, even though some have had success, but no one can write James Bond like Ian Fleming because you can't write James Bond like Ian Fleming did anymore.
Yeah.
He hated everybody.
But if you got to bear in mind, James Bond was, I think, 1/4 Ian Fleming himself, 1/4 just Christopher Lee, and another quarter was, or a third was Roald Dahl.
Yeah,
Oh, right.
That's who James Bond was modeled on.
yes.
And very much, a lot of it was Christopher Lee and Roald Dahl. And I also think the big difference is why you can't write Bond like you used to is because everyone who can remember World War II is dead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we saw a movie recently that was sort of a retro James Bond origin kind of thing. What was the name of that movie? You know, the one where they go off on the,
Henry Cavill, and
Oh,
Ian
right.
Fleming is one of the officers at home,
Yeah.
not one of the.
but it is an actual message that, mission that they did, but it's completely
Without
fictionalized.
Yeah, without women, without minorities,
Yeah,
without.
that's,
Yeah, like
because
the
that
fundamental-
was actual World War II. But, so they took part of that, and they, I think, are trying to build a franchise on it that's sort of a
Can't
James
say
Bond.
anything just stand on its own and not be turned into a franchise. It's
Yeah,
not,
well,
Corporate,
you want money or not,
Not-
that's,
Yeah.
especially if you're making movies.
yeah.
Is this the Ministry of Gentlemen of War?
Yes, that's it.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
It's a great title.
Have you noticed that with a lot of contemporary fiction writing, they'll deliberately backdate the stories to the 80s because smartphones. and
Right.
internet
Yes,
I've had to do that.
Nobody
all my
does
life.
easily defeat so many standard plot devices.
yes, it's hard to commit a murder nowadays and get away with it.
Oh,
Personal freedom on it.
If you have the least ingenuity, it's not hard. Most murderers are stupid.
When I
You
grew
probably
up,
don't know about the most successful ones.
when I was growing up, you could kill somebody with a typewriter, a telephone,
Yeah.
and a Coke bottle.
And they're likely to be more dangerous.
Can't do it with any of those now.
And that's
Unless they're really weak and just not very good at defending themselves.
Maybe they have an allergy to plastic.
Yeah.
Characters having a world of information at their fingertips.
Sure.
Well, that's also one of the things this, and the audience does. Because before, you could do all kinds of snookerish stuff. The audience would not necessarily know if it was slightly esoteric, and now, with Google, everybody can look everything up, and frequently some people don't understand it, then Google stuff up, but a lot of people know it's much harder to pull rabbits out of your hat.
Well, it wasn't their hat. It wasn't their hat.
You know that current writers are having a difficult moment in a movie when they're like, oh, we don't have self-service.
Where can you be without cell?
No, you don't go to the right parts of the country, sweetie, drive through big chunks of western
Actually,
US.
this room,
There's no cell
Yeah,
phone.
big chunks of
is not
Arkansas.
that good.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's,
You're
John and here from Macon, I went to Dead Zone.
Uh-huh.
And, yeah, in my hometown in Arkansas.
I can believe that, no problem.
Or there's no carrier there.
Yeah.
Or your battery went out.
You know, but you don't see those little ugly towers after a while, you will have no service.
Yeah.
Which no bird is probably stupid enough to believe is a real tree. I don't know why they fake you trying to make them look like trees, they're just like mutant wild things.
But there's all kinds of, there's different
They can make them
plot
look attractive,
devices
like an
now.
Eiffel Tower, you know, like cool metal structures.
And, well, that's why a lot of stuff is gonna be set in the 90s.
Okay,
Right.
so any questions from the people we haven't heard of? We've got 8 minutes left, or actually
Yeah.
probably 3 minutes or something. We're supposed to finish on that, 5 minutes.
Well, where do you guys think things are going?
Oh,
Should I tell the handbasket?
It's nobody doing it.
Yes, that's the obvious answer. Ignore that.
How did I get in this handbasket? Why is it so
Where am I
hot?
going and why am I not fast?
Well, most
Yeah,
of
yeah,
it
it's
is
ours.
broke in media delivery and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think unfortunately paperbacks this way are good. And that's unfortunate
That's unfortunate.
because it's much cheaper for the young people buying things, but then again, they'll just get it for free.
Well, it's also a question of resources.
Yeah.
Well, actually, and Sean's point is good, numbers of people who actually read, there's so much more to do. I mean, when I was a kid, there were 3 TV channels, actually we lived in the metro, so we actually had PBS and a UHF channel, we had 5 channels, we were rich. But it didn't start till afternoon, you know, and so there's TV, outside, and books. You know, and nowadays, I mean, with your computer going on our last, I used to think when people were talking about having cabin fever, I said, did you lose power? No, I said, you had the internet, you had all your electronics, you had your books and magazines, you had food and light, and you had cabin fever, just put them down now, you know?
Yeah, that was my, having been working from home for over 30 years, and it was like, with the pandemic, it was like, hell, look at my old bitches. And what got me is how many people just couldn't fucking handle it.
Yeah.
I mean,
You have everything. My great-grandparents would have thought that was paradise to be stuck in that house with all those things.
I used to have paperbacks all over, you know, when I was reading stuff. I had 3 because I finished these 2, and so I had a 3rd one. And I was by myself and reading and all that, which
Right, just on weekends, I would go through a dozen
probably
of
tells
them.
you why I have this.
Yeah,
today.
it's a snack when you do it. I discovered that today.
you get in trouble for reading when you shouldn't be, you know.
Well, is that still happening?
In some families, yes,
Yeah.
like it still comes up.
No,
Right?
my
The
family-
devil's making work for idle hands and reading is idle.
And fortunately, it was one of the few things my parents weren't into, so that was really
My
good.
parents didn't care if I read. Like I said, they obviously didn't care what I read either, because I read anything I brought home.
Yes.
Well, my problem is I'm not reading what I should have been reading, which is, you know, like the assigned,
The sign, book,
Yeah.
the sign, math
yeah, that's not
problems.
right.
Well, it's not math problems, it's kind of legitimate reason. There's no reason to torture 10th graders by making them read the Red Badge of Courage. You're just gonna make
Well,
them
that's
like
true.
hit their head repeatedly against the wall. I mean, you want them to build reading skills. Let them read something they will enjoy.
I will say that, you know, we did a panel yesterday with Anya yesterday, and let me tell you, it opened my eyes too,